Coming up today on RoxomTV News, European regulators are taking aim at TikTok's addictive design, warning the company it may need to rethink how its app keeps people scrolling. Blockchain data is showing major crypto insiders, including wallets linked to Vitalik Buterin and Trump-affiliated projects, moving millions in digital assets. And investor Michael Burry is raising fresh concerns about Bitcoin's recent slide, saying it could ripple through broader markets. All that and more right now on today's show. Let's get into it. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another edition here at RoxomTV News. We're going to get this morning started with our Bitcoin story of the hour that's occurring from a late-night Substack post to trading desks across Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Now, this warning is spreading fast through America's entire financial system. You see, when Michael Burry starts writing about market risk, people tend to pay attention. He is the investor who famously bet against the housing market before the 2008 financial collapse, and now he is turning his focus to Bitcoin. In a recent Substack post, Burry argued that Bitcoin's roughly 40% drop from its October high highlights what he sees as its speculative nature. He says there is no built-in mechanism to stop a prolonged sell-off once momentum turns negative, and that worries him. Burry warned that another 10% decline could seriously damage companies with massive Bitcoin holdings. That includes firms like Strategy, ticker symbol MSTR. He says those losses could shut these companies out of traditional capital markets. Or, in plain terms, raising money could suddenly become a lot harder. Now, that pressure, he argues, could force more selling, and more selling leads to deeper losses. Burry describes this as the early stage of a potential self-reinforcing spiral. His concern goes beyond just crypto. He claims Bitcoin's decline has already contributed to roughly $1 billion in precious metal sell-offs. He links this to liquidations in tokenized gold and silver products connected to crypto trading platforms. So when Bitcoin weakens, other assets may start feeling the strain. He also warns that mining companies could be pushed toward bankruptcy if prices fall much further. That could reduce network security and undermine confidence across the entire digital asset ecosystem. Now, from a pro-Bitcoin perspective, supporters argue that Bitcoin has survived far more severe downturns in the past. It has recovered from drawdowns of 70 and even 80% before. Institutional adoption, global demand, and long-term supply limits remain intact. But Burry's warning reflects how tightly connected modern markets have become. For audiences at home, this matters because crypto volatility does not stay contained. It can spill into stocks, retirement portfolios, commodities, and corporate investment decisions. Now, whether Bitcoin stabilizes or slides further, this cycle will play a major role in shaping how digital assets are viewed by investors, regulators, and financial institutions in the years ahead. All right, joining me to talk about this story and others this morning, one of our good friends of the program, Fernando, the Bitcoin Libertarian. Fernando, happy Friday or Saturday to you as you're living in the future. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Happy Saturday, happy Friday to everyone who is watching the video, the show, sorry. I'm so happy to be here. It's always a pleasure. And yes, I was reading about Michael Burry points about Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I'd be curious, Fernando, right off the bat here, when someone like a Michael Burry, who famously called the 2008 crash, starts warning about Bitcoin, do you, as a Bitcoiner, take that seriously, or do you see this as him doing what he always does, and that's just kind of signaling alarm bells and looking for risk everywhere? Because we've heard this before from him, and he's not always right. So I'd love to get your take on Burry's latest assessment of the Bitcoin space.
He was right only once. And of course, I respect on that. I am a big fan of the movie, The Big Short. This movie is amazing and shows how the system is destroyed from the inside. But he was right only once, and it's funny when Bitcoin is down. All these people who are against Bitcoin because either they didn't invest in the early stages and now they hate Bitcoin. They are all putting alarms of what the problems of Bitcoin. This is a danger. We have heard this multiple times during these 17 years of Bitcoin, and I don't give a crap of what they say. So I respect Michael Burry for two things. First one, the Big Short. Second one, he put on X a list of heavy metal bands that most of them I didn't know, and I discovered them thanks to him. But on the other side, what he says about Bitcoin, he's completely wrong. And what we see is something that usually happens to Bitcoin. What happens this time was there were a lot of leverage positions that were liquidated. And of course, the market, when the market goes up, and this is not Bitcoin, this is everyone. The point is Bitcoin operates 24/7, every day. So the thing is that when the market goes up, the narrative last year was, okay, now we reach another all-time high. We have a pro-Bitcoin president. United States is planning to buy Bitcoin, and everyone wanted to run first to overrun, go before all the new buyers that supposedly were coming. Everyone, including myself, were talking about the super cycle, that there was not gonna be a bear market, and most of the people went all in, went all leveraged, and sometimes it happened. It can go wrong, and they were liquidated. But I think that is no risk for Bitcoin. Bitcoin even can go down. I don't care about the price. I don't care about the short-term price. Bitcoin even can go to 10K. I don't care. Bitcoin is gonna go up forever, not because I say, not because I believe and I'm a Bitcoiner, it's because of mathematics. So that's the simple question. Of course, in the short term, we know that Bitcoin is volatile, but it's gonna go up forever. And all this fear that these people wants to put on the people, I don't agree. I would never agree with someone who talks bad things about Bitcoin. That's what all I want to say. I have to say.
Yeah, it's always interesting with Bitcoin. Anytime it goes down, unlike any other asset class that I can think of, the boo birds really come out in full force, and everybody who's an anti-Bitcoiner or who didn't get in early enough, so they choose to be on the side of just hating on it forever, really come out on their soapbox. I'm sure Peter Schiff is somewhere standing as tall as ever right now, talking about how Bitcoin's a fraud or what have you. But yeah, it's a really weird situation because nothing has changed fundamentally for Bitcoin, yet just the kind of sentiment has been poisoned, it feels like, a little bit in recent weeks and months, which is partially, I must imagine, contributed to the downturn which we've seen, which again is also due in part to a lot of over-leveraged positions. But back to Burry, Fernando, he's basically saying that if Bitcoin were to drop even more, it could start hurting companies and spreading into other markets. So my question for you is, do you think that's realistic now that crypto is more interconnected to Wall Street than it used to be? Could Bitcoin, sinking further really have effects on other parts of the industry now, given how interconnected it is?
I think that not only it's the same. Like, of course, the industries and the market are interconnected, but probably, yes, if Bitcoin goes down, it might hurt other aspects of the markets, but it will happen the same if, for example, AI goes down. Probably will affect Bitcoin without being a problem of Bitcoin. If the real estate go down, probably will affect Bitcoin. As you said, fundamentals hasn't changed. So there is nothing to worry about. Probably, maybe companies, there is all this fad around strategy that they might be liquidated. And Saylor was clear today on the call. They can even buy Bitcoin for 100 years, and they are not going to stop buying Bitcoin. So I have the funny thing, I want to point, there is an amazing podcast that I always listen. It's called True North. It's from the guys that are behind the BitcoinTreasuries.net, that I saw that they are associated with Roxom, the people who organize the Bitcoin Treasury company, and they were showing yesterday a strategy. During the bear market of 2022, the average cost of purchase for Sailor was 30K, and Bitcoin was 16. So the losses were bigger, and the debt was. I think that Bitcoin needed to grow the price 30%, so the value of the Bitcoin they held was the same as the value of the debt that strategy has.
Right.
Today, that of course is like probably, I don't know, but I think that Sailor is now in 5 billion on unrealized loss, whatever. But the Bitcoin needs to drop like 90%, so the debt of strategy is the same to the value of Bitcoin that they have. So all this FUD, this nonsense. It's nonsense. Sailor has 30 months of dividends to pay. So, and even though if they need to pay the debt, they just sell Bitcoin. Of course, the price can go down, and they pay it. So there is zero risk of strategy of being liquidated. And of course, Bitcoin always recovers.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have been through our fair share of Bitcoin cycles before, and we've seen previously that when Bitcoin crashes hard, like we've seen the last couple of weeks here, it usually comes right back eventually. So my question for you is, Fernando, does anything feel different about this cycle compared to past downturns we've seen to you? Because it feels different. I think the main thing is everybody was expecting Bitcoin right now to be sailing high and to the right, and those expectations haven't quite been met yet. So does this feel like more of the same type of cycling that we've seen in the past, or is this situation feeling different to you at all?
Usually, of course, every time it happens, is different. So, but the effect is different. So, but it's different on the front, but on the back is the same. So, usually are corrections that happen in every market, and usually are nice, are good to wipe out all the crap of the market, like the leverage position and all these things. Of course, what happened, not scared, but what called my attention was the violence, how the price dropped from 126 to 60K yesterday or today morning in Hong Kong. Now it rebound with nothing critical no critical news, because this was yesterday's drop was the fourth biggest drop on the decade. The previous one was 2020 due to COVID. The second one was during the crash of FTX. The third one was during the crash of Terra Luna. And yesterday was the other. And now nothing happens. Seems that nothing is happening, at least as we can see, that can trigger this massive price drop. So that is the only thing that I see different. On the other side, things happen. We who are on this market for a long time, we know that can go down 40% in a couple of months, 50%. We saw Bitcoin go down 90%, 77%, and always recover. So I hope the people, and this is no financial advice, would have used the drop to get more Bitcoin on their backs. I know many people that were happy. Usually I do a stream in the morning of Hong Kong for Latin America, and most of my viewers were happy because they were able to accumulate more Bitcoin at cheap price. So the only thing that is different now, that I see different, is that there is no major thing connected to this drop of the price. This is the only, and what happened yesterday, we measured on statistics, was the event is, I don't know if you know I don't know how to say in English, but the Gaussian belt. There is a statistical function that the event of yesterday was 5.6 sigma. The probability of this event of happening is like, I don't know, to point in my terms, is if I am able to compete in a martial arts championship and become champion in welterweight. So I think what happened yesterday was totally out of the probabilities and without anything else to justify. But these things happen.
Yeah, no, they do. But I think the important thing for people to remember right now is, we freak out when the price goes down like this, but we do have enough Bitcoin history to realize that as fast as we've seen it go down, it often can spike the exact same way. And like you kind of mentioned previously, this feels like a more muted decline than maybe some of the drawbacks we've seen in the past, which to me speaks to how solid Bitcoin's fundamentals are right now compared to previous cycles that we've had. But I'll be curious to see how this plays out in the next couple of weeks and months. I've talked to many people so far. Some think we're going to just kind of see more of a crab walk for the next 6 months and then maybe a lot more upside toward the end of the year. But only time will tell. And we're going to talk more about this in just a bit, Fernando. But right now, you and I are going to take a quick break. But when we're back, Fernando's going to be rejoining us, and we're going to be talking more of today's top stories, including what's going on with President Javier Milei and his team in Argentina. So stay tuned. More Roxom TV news coming at you right after this. Your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card, buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com to learn more. Welcome back to Roxom TV News. Our next story is coming out of Buenos Aires, Argentina's financial and political capital, where economic numbers are now under intense scrutiny. You see, after years of brutal inflation, Argentina had recently been showing signs of real improvement. Under President Javier Milei's libertarian reforms, monthly inflation fell to its lowest level in 8 years. For a country that has lived with triple-digit inflation, that was a major milestone. But this week, that progress was overshadowed by a sudden resignation. Marco Lavagna, head of Argentina's National Statistics Agency INDEC, stepped down abruptly, and his exit exposed serious internal disagreements over how inflation is being measured. Now, at the center of the dispute is a long-planned update to the Consumer Price Index. The current system is based on spending patterns from 2004. Yes, 2004. Now, under that outdated model, inflation appears lower than it likely is today. Economy Minister Luis Caputo says the new formula will be delayed until disinflation is consolidated. No timeline was given. Now, sources told Reuters that the updated method could push inflation readings from around 2.5% to roughly 3.2%. Now, that difference, it matters, and markets, they reacted quickly. Investor confidence dropped, stocks fell, and Argentina's country risk score rose. Opposition lawmakers accused the government of protecting its political image by postponing changes that would make inflation look worse. Supporters say stability must come first. Now, this controversy also brings back some painful memories. You see, in the early 2010s, Argentina was accused of manipulating inflation data so badly that the International Monetary Fund formally censured the country. That episode scared off investors and raised borrowing costs. Many Argentinians still remember that, and ordinary citizens say they still feel price pressure in rent, utility, and groceries regardless of what official numbers are currently showing. One Buenos Aires resident told Reuters her trust in the data has completely collapsed. And for those of you at home, this should matter to you because economic credibility is not optional. When people stop trusting official numbers, markets tend to get jumpy, borrowing tends to become more expensive, and growth often slows. Argentina's reforms may be working, but without believable data, even good policy struggles to gain lasting confidence. We're bringing Fernando back. Fernando, Argentina had finally started getting inflation under control, and now this resignation has raised a whole bunch of questions about that data. So how damaging is it when people stop trusting the numbers? What do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's from the point of view of an economist that I am, I think that not having proper statistics is not good to not have the correct statistic, because if you measure, if you try to make policies with wrong numbers or with fake numbers, it's not possible. So it's like, I don't know, if I see the board where the Bitcoin price is and shows me another price. So that's the point. But what happened here, the comparison that they want to do with the 2011 that I was living, at that time, they were faking the numbers. So the thing is that they were faking for example, the real inflation was 3 and they just put 1 because they just say, okay, they put whatever they want. It was not even, they were really faking the numbers at that time. What is doing Milei now, and I support him, is they don't want to change the way they measure the inflation in the middle of the government because this can trigger more political instability. What they want to do is to keep using the same rule to measure inflation that was used by the former government. So they can say, okay, the former government, so they want to have a comparison. So they say, okay, check the disaster that Alberto Fernandez government did, that they got the inflation near 300% annually, and they want to measure with the same the same instruments or the same index, so they can say we are improving the inflation towards Alberto Fernandez. When the inflation is really, really down, I think that they will change the index. For me, of course, it's ridiculous to measure the inflation with an index from 2004 because like the spends that we used to do in 2004 are much different than the spends that we do now. But say so, I think that the president needs to keep the same measure of inflation that from the past government until the inflation is under control. Probably when the inflation goes to 0 in a couple of months, they can change the new methodology, because what happened in Argentina is the opposition, the left, they are waiting they want to pick anything to go against the government. So what they are going to say is probably, okay, they change the inflation weight, the way to measure the inflation, and they say, oh, see, the inflation is the same of X months of 2023. And it's not true, because you are measuring with different methodology. So there is a big the opposition in Argentina is really they want to make the president resign. So they want to go to take the government out because the government is like going against their interests. So from my side, if I have to talk about economic, of course, we need to have indexes that measure the real inflation. That, by the way, the inflation index is not the real inflation. The real inflation is the money debasement. In any country, the inflation index doesn't reflect the real inflation. The real inflation is the money debasement. But say so, we need to change. But I think that the government needs to change it when the inflation is totally disappear from Argentina. That is going to be in a couple of months.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting scenario, and you're right. Like, you absolutely you need the real-time data to make any real policy decisions. Otherwise, you're just making stuff up in Playland and using the stuff from 2004 definitely isn't going to cut it. I remember how inexpensive things were in 2004. Man, things were better then. Take me back, Fernando. With that being said, Fernando, our time today, my friend, is wrapping up. But before we let you go, I want to say thank you for joining us as always. It's always such a treat to have you here with us on Fridays. And before we let you go, you, of course, have your own amazing podcast that I want to make sure everybody in the world knows about. So for our audience out there that hasn't already had the opportunity to check out what you're up to, what's the best place I can send them to see all of the amazing things you're doing on your show?
You can go to our X, the Bitcoin _, in English, and the Bitcoin ESP _ in Spanish. And from there, they can go to all our social media.
Amazing. Well, Fernando, thank you so much. I appreciate you sticking out with us. I know it's early in the Saturday hours for you, so enjoy your weekend, my friend. We'll see you next week. And as always, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much for having me, and see you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone, and enjoy the discounts in Bitcoin price.
That's right. It's a fire sale, baby. Enjoy your cheap Bitcoin, and I'll see you next week, Fernando. Thanks, buddy. All right, gang. We're taking a break here at Roxom TV News, but when we're back, we're going to be joined by our second special guest of the hour, and we got more of today's top news stories to discuss, so stay tuned. Roxom TV News coming right back at you after this quick break.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Welcome back to Roxom TV News. We're going to continue on with more Bitcoin stories this morning. And joining me to talk about them, I want to welcome to the show Eric V. Stacks, the co-host of the What is Money podcast, here to discuss this story and others with us this morning. Eric, thanks so much for joining us today. Happy Friday. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, man. It's exciting times.
Yeah,
a little wild, but that's how it goes in Bitcoin.
That's right. That's right. And I want to talk about it. Let's get right into it. We've seen Bitcoin dip back under 70,000 again. It's been a while. And every time that happens, it seems like half the internet panics. The other half starts celebrating for cheaper Bitcoin. So when you see a move like this, Eric, what's your honest read on the situation right now? What's the feelings that you're getting from what we're seeing now?
Oh, man. Good question. In a lot of ways, it's pretty unexpected. You know, I think 2025 was very underwhelming in terms of Bitcoin price. You know, if you ask Saylor what happened in 2025, he might yell at you for 15 minutes straight like he did Danny Knowles. So finding a good answer to that question has been somewhat difficult. But what I do always default to with Bitcoin is I think the only thing you can expect in Bitcoin is the unexpected. And so what that looked like going into 2026, was it, you know, a $500,000 Bitcoin, or was it a $50,000 Bitcoin? And I think if you stay humble and stack sats, as Odell has said, you know, and you avoid leverage and you remain fiscally responsible in your own inner little financial world, it might be disappointing, but shouldn't really be an issue. You know, a lot of these lending products, they have been a concern for me. I got a couple buddies. I was up late last night. I got a 3-month-old child, and my wife was breastfeeding and changing diapers and whatnot. And so I ended up on the phone with somebody who had a bunch of coins tied up and let in and was looking at liquidation at 60K, right? And so, you know, with Bitcoin, anything can happen. So I think you need to stay conservative, play the long game, wake up every day, make sure that your thesis and understanding or perspective on the world is still something that you align with, and then stay the course. You know, this is the most revolutionary technology we've seen in all of human history, in my humble opinion. So you got to hold the line, you know, and if we're trying to fix the money and change the world, you know, you need to get right with yourself. What are you trying to achieve? If you want 1,000x, maybe you should dabble in shit coins. But if you want to just stay solvent, stay humble, vote for peace, vote for abundance, and not get poor slowly, you know, don't freak out. Stay the course, man.
Yeah, this is certainly one of those moments where Bitcoin certainly tests your patience. And what is that saying that Michael Saylor says, we all buy Bitcoin at the price we deserve? So this is really, if you're holding Bitcoin, this is one of those moments where you're really earning those future gains down the line. And when you see when you look at what's happening with interest rates right now, Eric, inflation, global uncertainty, there's a lot going on. How much of this price action do you think is really about Bitcoin itself versus just being caught up in the broader macro environment we're seeing right now?
I think it's all about being caught up in the macro environment. You know, I'm like you could say in some ways I'm a Jeff Booth disciple. You know, Jeff Booth is one of my favorites in the space. And, you know, I could echo a lot of things that he says. And, you know, we have a immutable, inviolable ledger, right? And if this thing stays decentralized and secure, it quite literally changes everything. It's imposing a new rule set on our civilization, a civilization ran by people who are able to effectively lie, cheat, and steal. So it's expected that you're going to have volatility, especially at the time we are with this, you know, debt-based Ponzi scheme. It's rational to think we're going to have massive volatility, but as far as I could tell, nothing changed with Bitcoin. Whatever the total supply is today, 19.9, 20 million, whatever it is, that's still the same. TikTok, next block, as far as I know, last 10 minutes, a new block was mined. So nothing's changed in Bitcoin. I think it's exposing the instability in our existing financial order. And these things are expected. You know, paper Bitcoin, I interviewed with Robert Simon Dixon, and I really liked Simon Dixon's ability to break down all the things that are happening in the world. And to take like a high level, simplistic view of it, you effectively have a dishonest system colliding with a honest system that can't be corrupted. What do you think is going to happen? We're going to be poked and prodded, pressure tested. There's going to be attack vectors, you know, this core versus not thing. Like, that's kind of interesting. The Epstein file stuff, that's wild. You got geopolitical uncertainty. You got, you know, the proverbial overlords scrapping at who's going to have global control. Alliances are being made. Like, we're kind of at a climactic point in human history in the grab for control. And come stage left over the last 15 years, here's this inviolable, unmanipulatable, unfuckwithable protocol, and it's gonna be a wild ride. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah. And, you know, I think we all sometimes, and I'm certainly guilty of it as much as anybody, we get a little impatient. We think like we're really literally trying to readjust the entire financial system right now. We're only in year 16 or 17, and sometimes we get frustrated that this isn't happening faster. But it is happening at an incredibly fast pace right now. If we zoom out and look, like, hey, precious metals and fiat currency have been around for thousands, tens of thousands of years. So to introduce something that fundamentally changes everything we knew, it's going to take some time. And, you know, that's something that we really need to get across, especially to people that are new in the space. So my question to you, Eric, is if someone started buying Bitcoin in the last year, obviously we talked about it, there were a lot of promises of 2025 being a really great year for it, but it was a bit of a downturn. So I imagine those newbies to the space are feeling pretty let down right now. What would you want to tell them so that they don't make any emotional decisions that they might regret later when it comes to their Bitcoin, holding it, and continuing or not continuing to acquire it?
Ooh, oh man. Well, first thing that comes to mind is proof of work. what makes Bitcoin special is proof of work. It tethers a financial protocol to the laws of physics. You know, and I think that if you layer on top of that, like the experience of an individual who grapples with Bitcoin in these changing times, you have to do the work. You know, you need to trust, you need to verify and not trust. You need to get right with yourself and figure out what are you trying to achieve. And then for me and many others, I'm sure that are experiencing levels of disappointment, I suppose you could say, around the lack of moonshot that we experienced last year. This is maybe it's just not time, you know, and if you do zoom out, we're fucking shredding. We're killing the game, right? And so it's kind of like watching paint dry, you know, and maybe over the last couple of days, the humidity rose and the paint got a little bit wetter, but does it change what's really happening? I don't think so, you know, and I wake up every day personally. I make sure that my family's good. I do things to take care of my health so I can, you know, provide for my family. And I ask myself, is my assessment on the world and my thesis still stand? If it does, then I just stay the course, you know, and it does get almost religious in some ways. And, you know, being a little bit of a spiritual individual, grappling with the idea of quantum physics and the observer affecting our reality. Like I ask myself, what is it about my life and my vibrational frequency that's affecting the world around me? Am I not ready for a $500,000 Bitcoin? All right, well, it's time to get more prepared, become a better version of myself. If this isn't you know, if the thesis still stands and I have free cash flows and I need to figure out where to put it, well, where am I going to put it? I'm still on Bitcoin. I'm not going to sell my Bitcoin and buy some treasuries, some gold, some Apple stock. The thesis hasn't changed. I think the landscape is still the same. And kind of to circle back to some of the Jeff Booth ideas, this is expected. It's expected that we're going to see this. If you can't corrupt the main chain, this is a game theoretic shilling point. So we have very powerful people grappling with what it means to have Bitcoin part of the financial world. They can't shut it down. So if they want coins, what's a good way to get coins? If you are capable of causing volatility, there's almost an incentive to do so. You know, you got the SBR, you got the ETFs, you have all of these proverbial overlords, you could say, grappling with the fact that this thing exists and a bunch of plebs own a significant percentage of the supply. So like, you know, Simon Dixon says, the proof of weapons network is likely going to attempt in some ways, whether it's organized at a high level or it's just a result of the way the system is designed and the volatility and the instability baked into this Keynesian economic garbage that we have operating in our world. You're going to have to deal with the volatility. And, you know, back to Odell, stay humble, stack sats. You know, if you're getting really greedy or impatient, maybe it's a time to go inward and ask yourself, what's the reason that's causing a person to do that? And as far as the new people that have just gotten into Bitcoin, do the work. Listen to the Sailor series. Go down the Jason Lowry rabbit hole, like grapple with some of these deeper, higher level philosophical game theoretic ideas and make a decision for yourself. You know, I'm 41 years old. In 2020 is when I unloaded the rest of anything that I had, that I was storing any economic energy in or any savings or capital or whatever. And I went all in on Bitcoin. And the decision at the time was based upon the fact that, you know, I'm kind of revolutionary in my thinking, and I want to affect positive change in the world and provide a better world for my children to live in, more so than I'm trying to just become really rich, right? And obviously having financial horsepower can help affect positive change in the world, but it's a vote for freedom, you know? And if it all blew up tomorrow, I'd wake up and I'd go back to the drawing board and I'd come up with a new strategy. Continue to go to the marketplace, provide value, spend less than what I earn, and I would figure out where to put it. But right now, Bitcoin's the best option for a multitude of reasons, from self-preservation, serving your self-interest, you know, the most gains over time with the highest probability of success, least counterparty risk, and it's a vote for the highest level of freedom we've ever had in human history.
Yeah, no, you make a lot of good points, and it's not unusual from what I've heard from pretty much everybody. I've interviewed hundreds of Bitcoiners at this point, and it takes time. It takes you doing the research. I mean, I got in the space back in 2016, but I didn't really understand Bitcoin truly probably till 2020. So that's just kind of part of the journey, and some people are ready to take that journey, and maybe they're not, which means they're probably not ready for $500,000 Bitcoin either. So I agree. The fundamentals are the same. We're just got a lot of macro chaos in the world right now. I think it's clearly affecting the price. We'll be fine. You and I both know it. We're going to move on to our next story here, Eric. As this one is emerging from the global Bitcoin developer community, a decentralized network of programmers spread across North America, Europe, and Asia who collectively maintain that the software that powers the world's largest cryptocurrency. Now, at the center of it is Gloria Zhao, known online as Glauzhao, who has stepped down from her role as a Bitcoin Core maintainer, voluntarily giving up her signing key and her authority to approve and merge code into Bitcoin's reference implementation. Now, only a small number of people in the world ever hold this responsibility, and it typically takes years of consistent, high-quality work to earn the trust required to reach that level. Now, this change does not alter Bitcoin's consensus rules, it does not weaken network security, and it does not affect how transactions are validated. But within the community, it carries symbolic importance because maintainers serve as stewards of quality and stability. Zhao became a maintainer in 2022 after spending years contributing to the project with a particular focus on mempool policy, transaction relay, and fee estimation, which are critical systems that determine how transactions move through the network and how fees are prioritized. Now, her tenure coincided with one of the most heated internal debates in recent Bitcoin history, centered around Bitcoin Core version 30 and policy level changes related to op return and data carrying transactions, which some critics argued encouraged blockchain bloat and non-financial uses. Supporters countered that the changes were limited in scope, carefully reviewed in public forums, and often misunderstood by those outside the development process. Now, despite the collaborative nature of Bitcoin development, some of that backlash became personal, placing Zhao under intense public scrutiny, even though decisions are made collectively through open discussion and review. Fellow maintainer Abubakar Sadiq Ismail wrote, "Thanks for the 3.5 years of work as a maintainer. She is an incredible colleague, friend, and mentor. Definitely an L to the Bitcoin Core." Now, developer Callie added, "Bitcoin losing Gloria as a maintainer is worse than any market price dump can be." Supporters emphasize that maintainers are not political leaders or central planners, but rather highly trusted reviewers who coordinate release, enforce technical standards, and protect the integrity of the code base. For those of you at home, this should matter because Bitcoin's long-term reliability depends on experienced contributors being willing to do difficult, often thankless work over many years. And when respected developers step away, the resilience of that system gets quietly tested. So far, the network continues to function smoothly, which in many ways is the strongest argument for the open source model. We're bringing Eric back. Eric, when news breaks that someone as respected as Gloria Zhao is stepping down as a core maintainer, it can sound alarming to people who don't follow development closely. So in practical terms, what does this actually mean for Bitcoin day to day? Can you enlighten us on that a little bit?
Oof, this one touches a rabbit hole that is rather deep, and I'm not super tech savvy, so I'm not very well versed in all of the details around this core versus knots thing.
Sure.
However, I do think Bitcoin being an open source protocol, what we've seen is it's like a SAR response. It's a system acquired resistance. It's like an immunological response to what part of the ecosystems considers to be pathogenic. And I do have concerns around changing the protocol. I'm a very conservative individual, which is somewhat ironic for somebody who professionally produced cannabis for 17 years and has a 100% allocation to Bitcoin. But I am conservative, and the reason that I have 100% allocation to Bitcoin is because I'm conservative, right? I feel like if you have money you don't want to lose over time, you should consider putting it into Bitcoin. Now, with the core versus knots debate, my concern is that we open an attack vector to reduce decentralization. And so the idea of having a large op return it's my understanding that it allows for more functionality and more NFT style functionality and things to be put onto Bitcoin. Now, I am a free market proponent, and I do think that the free market sorts these sort of things out. And until the discussion of CSAM came out, mid last summer, and it became more of a topic, Matt Cratter and Mechanic and several people that started talking about that. That was the first time I had like an oh shit moment of being like, wow, okay, this is maybe more concerning in the short term than I had thought it was. Initially, I thought, okay, if we have blockchain bloat, we drive innovation, and traffic to layer 2, which is good. As more people use Lightning and other L2s, it'll free up block space. It'll be cheaper to move sats or UTXOs on the main chain, and we'll kind of come to some market homeostasis. But where we are as far as, the greater transition in human history, I think that the one thing that we need to be careful of is the potential attacks on decentralization. So as just an everyday, humble, normal dude, just a pleb living my life who wants to be able to like buy clean, non-poisonous food for my family or whatever, like what I think is if we have a large op return CSAM block hit the blockchain, it could create some serious FUD and some problems. Now, some people say that you're able to do that with an 80 kilobyte op return, and having 100,000 kilobyte op return doesn't change that. Now, once again, I'm not a developer. I don't know how valid that argument is or isn't, but the concern is real. This is a time when I think more people, I'm 41 years old. I can't remember a time in my entire life where pedophilia had been talked about more. And so if we have something like that, it could cause people to self-censor. It could give some jurisdictions that are becoming slightly more tyrannical, give them the potential at very least to say, hey, it's either illegal or unfavorable to run a node. I can see it right now. Just, all right, you fucking peasants, good job. You guys got this nuclear grade, institutional grade asset, to where it's at today, but you guys are filthy animals and irresponsible. We're going to go ahead and take over. It's illegal to run a node. We're going to have Amazon and Meta and BlackRock and Coinbase. They're going to run the nodes. And we could risk kicking this freedom grenade down the road 20, 40, 50 years. Now, the game theory, I think, still plays out. You'd have other jurisdictions where people are going to run nodes. And so I don't think it would kill Bitcoin, but it could hurt the decentralization. And in my understanding, that is all built on nodes. We need more nodes, not less. So I feel like if, with Gloria, like if you don't like JPEGs and monkeys and this and that, like that's your thing. And like, just because you want to say that's not a valid transaction, like that's kind of your thing, just deal with it. I forget the specific quote. I've seen that clip of the Peter McCormick interview with her several times. I'm trying to save the fucking world, dude. Like, can we usher in scarcity and money so that we can create abundance and everything else? Like, why are we worried about JPEGs? I just was on a live stream like 2 weeks ago with G Money. G Money, great guy, revolutionary. He's against taxes, and we have all these aligned values. And at the end of the show, he's like, "Oh, I got these Pepes. I think this Pepe goes for $2,000 a Pepe." I'm like, who the fuck is paying $2,000 for a Pepe? Like, you want to buy a Pepe for $2,000? Like, I'm all for it. Let's do that. But can we like save the world first? I think Bitcoin is humanity's masterpiece. It's like, so with small op return, you can go into the motherfucking Taj Mahal of freedom and you could stick a piece of gum on it. Fair enough. You could go ahead and you could put a piece of gum on the Taj Mahal of freedom, humanity's masterpiece. But if we increase op return, it's like we're allowing people with backpacks full of rattle cans of spray paint. Like, do we really need to like graffiti all over this thing? Like, this is the most important thing that's happening in the world today by a long shot. Let's not fuck it up.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. And as far as Gloria, I think she got so much pushback from people who are trying to, make sure this works. And she had to step down. And, that's unfortunate. Maybe she was a good, developer and all of that. But this is an emiological response from a global network, as far as I can tell. And so, and maybe there's real problems that I'm entirely unaware of that raising the op return solves. But I feel like it's a little risky. Saylor famously said this a long time ago, like, don't change it. Like, why are we changing it? Why are we adding new functionality? Neon lights and disco balls. Like, I don't, that's cool. We can do that on Solana or Ethereum or an L2 or whatever. Like, do we need to do that on the main chain? So in that sense, you could say I'm somewhat of a purist, although I am a free market proponent. I don't know that it's time. And I think that a significant percentage of the Bitcoin community globally is concerned about this stuff. So I'm sure, it's very nuanced and there's probably valid arguments from both sides. But like, dude, people are fucking dying in the streets because they can't afford housing. Like right now, boom, in the last 2 seconds, someone died homeless on the streets. Can we like figure out how to solve our financial systems before we do dick butts and monkey pictures and wizards and shit on the Taj Mahal of freedom? Like,
yeah, that would certainly seemingly be, I agree with you on that. I will say, Gloria, thank you for your time and service, and thank you for not effing it up, I guess, right? So we're going to
we don't know.
Story to cover. We don't know yet. I'm hoping. All right. Our last story this first hour here is playing out in real time on public blockchains where transactions are permanently recorded and visible to anyone with an internet connection, making it impossible for large financial moves to remain hidden for long. You see, blockchain analysts recently flagged wallets linked to Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin moving significant amounts of wrapped ETH, while wallets tied to World Liberty Financial, associated with the Trump family, reportedly sold roughly $5 million worth of wrapped BTC. Now, these transactions, tracked by analytics firms Arkham, immediately reignited long-running debates about decentralization, insider incentives, and who really controls supply during periods of stress. Supporters of these projects argue that this behavior is normal financial management, pointing out that founders, foundations, and affiliated organizations often diversify holdings, hedge risk, and rebalance portfolios as markets fluctuate. Critics, however, respond that this is precisely what exposes the structural weakness of many crypto projects, which are organized more like corporations than decentralized networks, complete with pre-mines, insider allocations, governing boards, and centralized treasuries. And when volatility rises, those insiders usually have both the information and the ability to move first, leaving retail investors exposed to sharper losses. Over the past decade, this pattern has repeated itself across countless tokens and platforms, producing the same cycle of hype, insider selling, and disappointed latecomers. The World Liberty Financial sale drew particular attention because it involved wrapped Bitcoin rather than actual Bitcoin, highlighting the role of custodial intermediaries, legal agreements, and counterparty risk that come with synthetic versions of digital assets. Wrapped Bitcoin depends on trusted third parties, meaning that when market stress increases, those layers of dependency can quickly become points of failure. We're bringing Eric back. Eric, when people see on-chain data showing wallets linked to someone like Vitalik and Trump-affiliated projects selling millions in crypto, it tends to grab people's attention pretty quickly. So why do you think those kinds of moves hit differently than just regular market selling? Is it maybe part of the signal that goes along with those sales? What are your thoughts?
Well, I do think at this point in time, when I hear the word crypto, it gives me like kind of a nausea response. Like it's like this term, Bitcoin was the original crypto. It's, cryptography, it's a thing. But when I hear crypto, it bothers me. And so I think that your average individual, hasn't made the distinction and the difference between Bitcoin and everything else. And it kind of muddies the water. It confuses people. It's easy to grab a news story as a reporter and be like, oh yeah, crypto took a big hit because Vitalik and the Trump brothers sold something that's not main chain UTXO sets, especially if it's wrapped Bitcoin or ETH or whatever. And so I think that's just, it's trading. It's trading. Saylor famously said at in his keynote in 2023 at Bitcoin Prague. When he said this, I almost fell out of my chair. He said trading Bitcoin is a sign of lesser intellect. So I would argue that trading anything outside of Bitcoin is maybe even a lower level than that. But we're coming out of an era where everything is a trade. Everything has some sort of mixed flavor of counterparty risk. That's why we have this standard diversified portfolio, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, whatever it is, right? It's because everything's got, a different flavor of counterparty risk. And so we're conditioned societally to like try to get on the fastest horse, but at some point you have to exit, and a lot of the Bitcoin community refer to Bitcoin as the final trade. Like when Bitcoin was $125,000, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm going to peel some off and I'm going to allocate it to some T-bills. If I woke up tomorrow and Bitcoin was $3 million a coin, I'm going to unload a couple coins so I could go buy some apartment buildings and some S&P and some yellow shiny rocks. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so Bitcoin's the final trade. I would argue that these individuals, especially the Trump brothers, have made some significant yield or returns on these investments, and they're trying to figure out how to make the most money possible. And I think that has second and third order negative effects, and that's unfortunate, but that is the old world that we used to live in, and it's colliding with the new world. I think 2009, since the beginning of time to 2009, I refer to it as the BB world, before Bitcoin. We live in the AB world after Bitcoin. In a lot of ways, the fundamentals of our reality have changed. You can hide your economic energy in a invisible instrument that nobody can take from you. The implications of that are really deep and profound. And so, I think that we're going to see more of this. And, I've thought long and hard about, like, how does Bitcoin, change incentives? And it inverts incentives in most, if not all ways. But in some ways, it almost incentivizes more scumbaggery, more manipulation, more pump and dumps. Like David Bailey, for example, like Naka, all this shit. Like, what do you think David Bailey did? And now I don't know the details around Naka, but let's say he starts Naka. He's got shares. It goes from nothing to whatever it was, some big pump. If he takes profit, where's he going to put that profit? Probably in Bitcoin. This is like the new financial world. And the game is how many seats at the new table can you get? So I think we're going to see a lot of chaos, and a lot of people attempt to make fat returns. But I would argue that ultimately in time, it's all going to find its way into Bitcoin. So I would advise people to be conservative, unless you're a really sophisticated trader and you can sit there and look at the charts all day and make sense of that nonsense. Just maybe stay humble and stack sats. Find something that you love to do. Be responsible. Don't go out and buy Lambos if you can't afford them. And figure out how to get a seat at the new table. It's pretty straightforward. It's fun to talk about, and I spend my whole life thinking about this stuff at this point, outside of taking care of my family and doing the things that I need to do. But really, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. In a world with technological advancements and AI and all this abundance, like, what do you want? You need to park your energy in the scarcest asset, and we have true scarcity now. And so. For a multitude of reasons, from self-preservation and affecting positive change in the world, I think there's only one real answer, and that's Bitcoin and self-custody.
Yeah, no, I agree. As Saifedean says, right? Bitcoin is the hurdle right now, and I think you and I can both agree on that. So it's up and to the right forever. This is just a momentary dip we're seeing, as we've seen many times during Bitcoin's history. Eric, I gotta say, it's been an absolute blast having you on the show today. We got to start wrapping up our time here, but before we do, I'm sure you've gained at least a couple of new fans in our audience today, and I know you have an amazing show of your own, the What is Money Show. Where can our audience go check it out if they haven't already? Where can they go find out more information on you if they want more of your hot takes and to see what you're up to?
Yeah, so I've been hosting the What is Money Show with Robert Breedlove. We're on YouTube, Spotify, X, What is Money, or WIM Media. And my personal X page is Eric, ERIC, V Stacks, Eric V Stacks. You can find me on all the socials. And thank you, man. It's been fun chatting, and viva la revolution.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you so much for dropping in, Eric. And hopefully we'll have you on again sometime this year to talk shop. I got a feeling this is just the beginning, and there's a lot of good things in store for us here in 2026. So thanks for stopping in with us. It's been a pleasure. And enjoy your weekend, my friend.
Yep, you too. Peace.
Peace. Thanks, Eric. All right, we're taking a break here, gang, at RoxomTV News. But when we're back, we're going to be diving into our second hour of today's programming, and I'll be joined by our RoxomTV co-host, Walker America, as we break things down of all of today's top news stories. So stay tuned. More RoxomTV News coming your way right after this quick break. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. Before we dive into the second hour of today's program, let's take a moment to recap what we covered during the first hour of today's show. Michael Burry's warning that Bitcoin's recent slide could trigger a broader chain reaction across markets, especially if heavily exposed companies start facing funding pressure. And we also looked at the political fallout in Argentina after the head of the country's statistics agency resigned over disputes about how inflation is measured. And wallets linked to Vitalik Buterin and Trump-affiliated projects moved millions in crypto, reigniting debates about insider behavior and decentralization. All right, joining me now for the second hour of today's show, fellow RoxomTV host and co-host here, we have Walker America. Walker, happy Friday. Great to have you as always. Thanks for joining us. How's it living?
Stoked to be here, Hank. The vibes are weird right now. Bitcoin was down quite a bit if you're measuring in fiat cuck bucks, but it is up on the day. So nobody hates a green candle on a Friday, right? I think it's a great way to go into the weekend.
Yeah, it reminds me of that. You ever seen that famous meme of the Undertaker? He's in a coffin and he just gets up. That seems like Bitcoin every time. Everybody thinks it's dead and it gets right back up, and it's all par for the course. All right, we're going to talk about our top world stories of this hour. So guys, let's roll the stinger so Walker and I can get into it. All right, we're beginning the second hour of today's coverage with some tragic news coming out of the capital of Pakistan this morning. Police say a suicide bombing at a mosque in Islamabad has killed at least 31 people and injured around 169 others. Police say the attacker was stopped near the mosque entrance by security personnel, and after being confronted, he opened fire before detonating an explosive vest in the middle of a crowd. So far, no group has formally claimed responsibility for the attack, and investigators told reporters that the bombing shows characteristics commonly associated with the Islamic State linked operations, although they emphasize that the investigation is still ongoing and that no final conclusions have yet been reached. Now, the attack comes amid heightened security measures linked to a foreign state visit and during a broader rise in militant violence across Pakistan, particularly targeting religious minorities. In recent months, attacks have increased in several regions, raising concerns that militant groups are attempting to reassert their presence after years of pressure from security operations. For viewers at home, this should matter to you because instability in nuclear-armed Pakistan affects regional security, global diplomacy, and international markets. And repeated attacks like this undermine public confidence and complicate efforts to maintain long-term stability in the region. We're bringing Walker back. Walker, when you hear something tragic like this can happen, even in a heavily protected capital city, does that change anything about how you think safe, how you can be safe, and can you really be safe anywhere anymore? That's kind of my initial feeling from a story like this, is it makes me question that. What's your initial beat on this tragedy out of Pakistan?
I mean, I think it's, tragic for one. Secondly, as far as what it makes me think about safety, I think that we live in very tumultuous times right now. As you and I have discussed repeatedly, they are going to continue getting more tumultuous. There is also, I think, a tendency for people, it's very easy to focus on all of the danger out there in the world, and there certainly is a lot. But so much of that is just amplified by the news cycle, the fact that these things are broadcast around the world. And if you only look at, what the news is putting out there, you are going to have a very mean world, case of the mean world syndrome. Now, that's not to say you should not be cautious wherever you are and be kind of aware of your surroundings. And in the United States of America, luckily, you have the right to carry and bear arms. But it's also important to remember that, if this was a couple decades ago, you wouldn't even know about it and it wouldn't even be on your radar. So I think you have to really temper these things a little bit and remember that, yes, terrible things happen all over the place all the time. That doesn't mean that there is not still good in this world that you can find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make a really, really good point with that, because we think about that too. I grew up in the 90s, right? And I always think, I look back at the 90s, I'm like, things were better then. Kids weren't getting abducted and stuff all the time. But a big part of that was we just didn't have the media. The media didn't have the reach to cover everything the way they do now. So we hear about the worst of humanity all the time, because ultimately that is what gets a lot of clicks in media, right? So you make a really good point that we hear these horrible things and it makes it feel like the world has never been in a worse place than it is right right now. But then you think there's a lot of good things out there. It's just the media normally goes toward those bad things. So it kind of feels like this echo chamber of bad news that we're always hearing all the time. But this Pakistan situation is a little unique in that, Pakistan is a nuclear country. And when a country like this has nuclear capabilities and they're dealing like the attacks that we're seeing now, does that affect you in any way or make you feel worried about global stability? Or does that still feel pretty distant to you from everyday life? Has that changed for you at time overall? Like that we can even hear about this stuff in Pakistan and they have nukes? Does that change how you feel?
I try to worry about the things that I have the ability to control at the end of the day. What Pakistan does with their nuclear armament is not one of those things that I can control. And I would also say that, there are so many things going on right now in the world that should probably give people more pause for concern than this in particular. But that being said, it's like we do live in a world that's, has a massive nuclear arsenal. It's not going to be disarming that anytime soon. There is that idea of mutually assured destruction, which hopefully keeps a relatively peaceful status quo in the meantime. But, anything can happen. Wish I had a bunker, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, we are certainly in a time where it feels like anything can happen. In fact, the United States might take over Greenland soon or something. I believe we're going to move on to our next story about that because there's some new news coming out of Greenland.
Yeah, specifically, Canada and France have opened up a new diplomatic outpost in Greenland. They've each opened up their own. It's a symbolic but pointed show of support for Denmark as competition over the Arctic heats up. Now, this move follows months of tension, and this was really sparked by President Donald Trump's repeated statements that the United States, quote, needs Greenland for security reasons, along with tariff threats against Denmark and other European countries. Although Canada had pledged to open a consulate in 2024, officials say the timing now carries added political weight. France has described its presence as a clear commitment to Greenland's sovereignty and territorial integrity, aligning closely with Copenhagen's position. For Canada, the tiny outpost, housed in a shared building and serving fewer than 24 citizens, signals a broader effort to reassert its Arctic role after years of limited engagement. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government has pledged to boost defense spending, expand northern infrastructure, and deepen security cooperation with allies. And Anand says that the consulate reflects Canada's Arctic strategy and its aim to strengthen regional stability as Russia and China expand their presence in polar regions. The diplomatic push also reflects Greenland's delicate balancing act. The semi-autonomous territory relies on Denmark for defense, but is steadily exploring greater independence and new economic partnerships. Its leaders are trying to attract investment in mining, fishing, and airports while resisting pressure from larger powers. Recent talks between the U.S. and Denmark and Greenland on Arctic security have underscored how central the island has become to Western strategy. Now, analysts caution that a handful of diplomats will not transform the region overnight. But in Arctic politics, symbolism matters. By planting flags in Nuuk, Canada and France are signaling that Greenland is no longer a peripheral outpost. It is now a front line in global competition over security, resources, and influence in a rapidly warming North. Now, Hank, I'm going to bring you back up here. I mean, do you think that this sort of posturing by the likes of Canada and France makes any real material difference, or is this just politicians playing politics?
Yeah, I don't see this making any difference. I mean, you got to show face, right? We kind of saw this from other countries in even smaller forms. Was it like Germany sent like 15 troops to secure Greenland further? Yeah, this is just posturing. I was kind of thinking when I was listening to the story, at what point did we all suddenly realize how strategically important Greenland apparently is? Did this not happen until Trump said, made references of potentially wanting to snatch it for the United States? Because I was not aware of this at all until a couple of weeks ago when this story first broke. So I'm a little confused as to why all of a sudden everybody started paying attention to Greenland again out of nowhere, given how seemingly important it is. And then, two, yeah, I don't think this changes anything. When I was talking to Nolan Bowerly on the show about this a few weeks ago, he made a point. He's like, if the United States wants Greenland, really, what is anybody going to do? Like, there's not really a lot of recourse to prevent the United States from doing it if we wanted it. It's not really a good look for us. But this whole situation to me is still kind of funny. I get it's important, but I don't think this France and Canadian posturing are going to do much for what's ultimately going to happen to Greenland. But that's just me trying my best to read the room. What are you kind of feeling about this latest move out there?
I think that a lot of this just comes back to reactionary approaches to anything that Trump does. Now, this is not me endorsing Trump's actions or saying that I think everything Trump does is good. Merely pointing out that what we've seen from European or Canadian or any other world leaders is really that whatever Trump does, they have a negative response to it. You see very few positive responses out there, regardless of the actions taken. And, you saw similar responses with Venezuela, right? People saying, well, Maduro was a dictator, but maybe, Trump shouldn't be doing this. And so, again, I think that what we're seeing is a lot of jockeying in a changing world order, right? It is a multipolar world now. In terms of Greenland's strategic importance, obviously, all you have to look at is the potential trajectory of ballistic missiles from the U.S. across the Arctic and where those missiles would land, or vice versa. And you start to see why Greenland has that sort of strategic importance here. I also think that a lot of it is when it comes to the talks of protecting Greenland's sovereignty. I think that this conversation is kind of hilarious because it's not a sovereign nation. It's a territory of Denmark. Like, they are subservient to Denmark. So to say we need to protect their sovereignty, it's like, what sovereignty? You're protecting Copenhagen and Denmark and their interests. So just be honest about that. Don't try to make this about sovereignty. It's like, and at the end of the day, the people of Greenland can decide to leave Denmark, leave that, stop becoming their territory and become sovereign through referendums. So, I mean, I say, at the end of the day, leave it up to the people. They have open referendums, direct democracy in this sense. So, let them have a little bit of self-governance. Maybe more people than we realize would actually want to be a U.S. territory or be a completely sovereign territory. Who knows? But I do think that it's important to point out some of the hypocrisy about saying you're trying to protect Greenland's sovereignty when they're not actually a sovereign nation to begin with. I don't know if that kind of struck you as funny as well.
Yeah, the whole situation is kind of funny. I thought they already kind of went and got a straw poll from a lot of people in Greenland. And they're like, we do not want to be a part of the United States. So I think that might be something to remember. I don't know how official that was, but I think I remember hearing about that. This whole situation is funny. And I understand with, the glaciers melting and Greenland becomes more usable for those strategic reserves. But I still think it's really weird that I didn't hear any of this until Trump kind of came out and said he was thinking about acquiring it for the United States. It's a weird situation. I don't know what to make of it. It's completely changing the allies situation from everything we've known from the last 40 or 50 years till now. I'll be very curious to see how this one's going to play out. I'm sure this won't be the last news we hear out of Greenland anytime soon. In the meantime, though, Walker, you and I are going to take a quick break, but when we're back, we have more of this morning's top stories to chat about, including what's going on with Bitcoin. We're below 70K. Is it over? Is it dead? Walker and I are going to talk about it as soon as we're back here from this quick break, so stay tuned.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index is collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. The price of Bitcoin is just over 70,000 infinitely printable US petrodollars per coin. We're up a bit on the day. We're down quite a bit on the month, if you're measuring it in fiat, of course, but most of us do, let's be honest. We're going to bring up our next guest here. I'd like to welcome to the stage Halston Valencia. She runs Bitcoin marketing at the Bitcoin Well. Halston, welcome to the show. How are you doing? What's your vibe check right now on the current Bitcoin price action? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. I think there's a lot of FUD going around, and listen, I'm going to be so straight up. I'm not giving into it. I think that I was just on a space last night with a bunch of Gen Zers. There was I think ultimately 400 Gen Zers joined, and not a single person was upset about the price action. And so I am ultra bullish. I'm even more bullish right now because I think we're cleaning up the price here and getting rid of all of these just heavy leverage liquidations in derivatives markets and all this paper Bitcoin. And so I think, especially for someone in Gen Z, this is a strong buying opportunity. I don't think this is ever going to happen again under $100,000 once the price goes back up and passes that six-figure mark. I don't think we're ever going to see this opportunity again. And so I see it as a massive opportunity of a lifetime for our generation. And I always say, boomers had real estate, we have Bitcoin. So if you're not buying right now and doing everything you can to get some extra fiat stinky dollars to buy more hard money sats, then I don't know what to tell you. You're not doing it right.
I love that perspective on Gen Z. Oh, no, go ahead, Hank.
No, I wanted to learn more about Gen Z and what the kids, you said that everybody seems okay with the pullback, but I'd be curious what is everybody thinking as to what's causing it right now? What seems to be the general understanding among Gen Zers as to why they think we've seen this most recent drawback?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people on TikTok and Instagram comment on the Epstein FUD. That could be part of it. I think my generation especially is very concerned about getting canceled. And so I think that a lot of people that don't truly feel convicted about Bitcoin's mission and what Bitcoin stands for, they are just quick to sell because they don't want to be associated with the new pedo coin message. And so that could be it. I think another thing too, I saw Luke Groman had a good take on this. A lot of just fears around AI and through it coming out with all of these really cool tools. I mean, we saw 25,000 people get laid off in a month last month in tech. So I think, there's a valid point. People are just getting scared and want to preserve their dollars, which I don't know why you would want to do that and not preserve the hard money. But yeah, I think there's mixed feelings definitely in Gen Z. I don't know if I'm just in this echo chamber on X, but I'm seeing lots of Gen Zers see this as a massive buying opportunity.
Let me ask you, Austin, because I'm not on TikTok, but I do have an Instagram account for the podcast. And one thing that I've noticed is that when I've gone on the Discover page there, even if you search Bitcoin, most of the content is very crypto focused versus Bitcoin focused. It seems that there's actually a very small number of actual Bitcoin only creators, influencers, whatever you'd like to say on there. I mean, is it fair to say that in the kind of the Gen Z cohort that there is more of an attraction toward crypto, or is this just, there happen to be a lot of influencers about, talking about this, but really there is a big percentage that are looking more at Bitcoin and only Bitcoin versus all the other kind of get rich quick crypto scams out there?
I would say on Instagram and TikTok, I'm kind of seeing the same thing. Not really a lot of Bitcoin only influencers, mostly crypto influencers, traders. I think that's the thing with my generation, right? Is we're really feeling the pain of the financial system in real time. And so a lot of my friends even are attracted to the get rich quick scheme and just number go up. And so they see Bitcoin as a part of this crypto basket. They don't really see it as an individual superior apex asset the way that I would see it. And so I think that's why, we see a lot of crypto influencers because it's all about the arbitrage and the crypto bro lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a little bit concerning that because, Hank, sorry, I went over you one more time there. I just wanted to follow up with Halston there because, wanted to follow up with you there on that, Halston, because I think it's interesting. To me, this seems like a great opportunity for people who are in Gen Z like yourself, who are Bitcoin only, who might want to start doing some sort of content creation. Like there is obviously a huge gap in this. and people need to have more trusted voices that are giving them information that's actually not just trying to pump their own altcoin bags, but instead is trying to actually educate them about sound money. I'm just curious, what kind of made the switch flip for you, where you went, Bitcoin is the only thing, it's the apex asset, I'm not going to pay attention to anything else?
Yeah, I think for me, it was adopting and understanding wholeheartedly that low time preference mentality. I think that's the biggest struggle with being a Bitcoin educator. How do I get my generation to understand low time preference when everything is so high time preference right now? Everything's about how can I pay this month's rent? How can I don't know, how can I just make ends meet this month? And so it's hard to teach that. But I think once you understand that, it's hard to even look at any of these other altcoins that are just so temporary and so fiat. Like, even if you did make, a small return on a trade, it's like, okay, but how much did you actually make after inflation, fees, and taxes? It's probably marginal. Whereas if you look at something like Bitcoin, I guess right now is not the best example, but say last year, if you were to look at Bitcoin, it was up 1,400% in the last 5 years. So for me, that's what really sold it. And that's how I ultimately saw it as the apex superior asset.
Halston, we've been talking about the difference between crypto and Bitcoin, and Walker mentioned how it seems like there's a lot of crypto influencers out there, but not specifically as many as Bitcoin these days. And when Bitcoin first started, it was kind of like an FU to the traditional system a little bit, right? Like, you guys have been screwing us for years, so we're going to do it our way and we're going to do it better. But in the last year, we've obviously seen a lot of institutions come into the mix. We've seen the United States government change their tune on Bitcoin. So my question for you is, do you think any of that kind of Bitcoin being inserted into the traditional financial infrastructure, has that caused people to maybe turn their back to it a little bit, because maybe it feels like it's being co-opted by the very systems it was meant to kind of rally against in the first place? And I wonder if that would maybe have any effect as to why we're not seeing a lot of Bitcoin creators out there right now. I don't know if you've gotten that vibe from people in the Gen Z arena. I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I've totally gotten that vibe, and I could see that being, one of the reasons why my generation is maybe still a little bit skeptical about Bitcoin. I always say, watch what the banks are doing. So 5 years ago, we had people saying that Bitcoin was trash. It was useless. We had the CEO of JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, all of them denying Bitcoin and seeing it as a valuable asset. And now fast forward to today, now we have all these Bitcoin products. We have ETFs. We have now, is it Bank of America recommending 4% crypto allocation, I think is what it is, or one of the top banks. And so it's like, okay, all that time, all those years, they were telling you not to stack while they were stacking. And so I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. Watch what they do, not what they say.
Yeah, I think those are wise words, and it's kind of hard to trust them. Yeah, go ahead, Walker.
Yeah, maybe the last thing I would say on this is that you brought this up initially, Halston, this idea that, look, boomers had real estate. They bought their houses for a basket of raspberries in the 1970s, and they basically got all of the benefits of the fiat inflation. That fiat inflation, it was really great for them, because they held the assets. They held the assets at the time when the true fiat inflation really kicked into high gear, after we fully dislocated temporarily from the gold standard. That still waiting for that temporary measure to be taken back, but I guess that's not happening anytime soon. But I mean, what kind of message do you think needs to get out there to Gen Z folks? I mean, I like what you've said already. Boomers had real estate. We've got Bitcoin. But is there anything that you think that Gen Z is really missing right now? Is part of it just unit bias with some of this crypto stuff, where they think, oh, Bitcoin's still too expensive, I can't afford a full Bitcoin, so what's the point? Or is there something deeper there?
I think unit bias definitely plays a big role in that. I think another thing too is just people wanting the immediate arbitrage, and you're just not going to see that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin promotes that long-term, low time preference thinking, and I think historically these dips shake out the short-term speculators, all of the people that are just in it for the NGU, and reward people like us with the strong conviction, the hodlers. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of doomerism in my generation, and I'm working as an educator and content creator to try and mitigate that. I always say, we're the first generation to have the internet for instant reach AI for instant buildability and Bitcoin as like incorruptible money. No other generation has had that as a foundation. Yeah, the boomers might have had real estate, but listen, they barely had the internet. You know, they didn't have Quadco, they didn't have OpenClaw, they didn't have all these crazy tools that we have now. And I think that it's either you learn and adapt and use this to your advantage and really take advantage of this next shift that we're about to see, or you fall behind and it's really not going to go well for you. But I think this is like our boomer real estate moment, even better, I would argue.
Well, I got to say, Halston, it sounds like us Gen Xers or us millennials or whatever the heck I am set it up pretty good for you guys. You have everything instantaneous. So Gen Z, don't screw it up. We're going to move on to our next story here, you two, as we're going to be circling back to one of our top Bitcoin stories of the last hour, as blockchain data from Arkham shows wallets linked to Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin moving large amounts of wrapped ETH, while wallets tied to Trump-linked World Liberty Financial reportedly sold about $5 million worth of wrapped Bitcoin. And together, those moves have reignited a familiar debate inside of crypto. Supporters say this is normal risk management by founders and affiliated organizations, but critics argue it once again shows how many so-called decentralized projects still operate like corporations, with pre-mines, insider allocations, and built-in exit ramps. The fact that World Liberty was holding wrapped Bitcoin, which depends on custodians and middlemen, has also raised questions about added counterparty risk when markets turn volatile. For Bitcoin supporters, the contrast here is clear, because Bitcoin has no founder stash, no foundation treasury, and no committee deciding when to sell. And for investors watching at home, this latest dip is less about panic and more about understanding who really controls supply when pressure hits. We're bringing my two friends back. Halston, I want to start with you. When people, especially in the Gen Z community, see these wallets linked to big names like Vitalik and Trump-affiliated projects selling during this dip, do you think that immediately changes how the market feels about what's happening, seeing these kind of insiders start, dropping their bags when the rest of us are being told to hodl? What effect is that having you seeing that?
Yeah, honestly, this makes me even more bullish because I just think that more people's eyes are going to be opened up to this. I think this Ethereum story really reinforces the same point that Ethereum has a known founder who can just move markets with his wallet activity at any time. It's very centralized. And so I think this just is like the best marketing campaign for Bitcoin there is. It's like, listen, Bitcoin doesn't have this problem. It's open. It's a neutral protocol with no insiders, no centralization, no CEO, no one founder who can manipulate like that. And so, I see this and this makes me smile. I'm like, this is great for Bitcoin. I think this is the best kind of messaging I could have to share with my friends who are still very much into the ETH XRP world. It's like, listen, this would never happen with Bitcoin. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Good point.
It seems too like the narratives have really started to just completely disintegrate in the crypto world a little bit. Like they're not even trying anymore to say my insert whatever coin, ETH, Solana, whatever, XRP is better than Bitcoin because it does, it's better money than Bitcoin. Now they're kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, we just do other stuff, right? We're the world computer, or we're going to be, decentralized database for whatever, monkey JPEGs or whatever it is. It seems like they're not even trying to actively compete with Bitcoin anymore, which was the narrative they had for so long. I mean, do you think, I'm curious too, Halston, to get your perspective on this, we're seeing the proliferation of prediction markets in these various crypto casino apps out there, like Coinbase has implemented all this prediction market stuff, Robinhood too. And so, I mean, do you think this is sort of just acknowledgement from some of these past crypto pumpers that like, look, this is the final exit for crypto, for altcoins. Now we're just going to, just do outright gambling with prediction markets. Let's just be honest about it. And we'll leave the altcoins by the wayside. What's your take?
Yeah, this totally could just be their next thing. I mean, I hate the prediction markets. I think it's just like peak degeneracy. And oh man, if I had, if every time someone asked me about what I thought the Bitcoin price would be in 6 months, like I'd be so rich by now if I just had like even 10 cents every single time someone asked me. It's so frustrating because I feel like my generation is just so stuck on this get rich quick, whether it's prediction markets or the crypto trading or the altcoin trading. It's just, yeah, I mean, like you said, this could be the final thing, just finally like moving on to that. I mean, I don't really know. I don't see this ever being something too big. I think, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money and it's not going to go well.
Yeah. And speaking of people losing lots of money, Halston, I'd be curious to get your angle on this. So we've seen the emergence of a lot of new persona-backed coins this year in the market. Specifically, the one I'm thinking, of course, is Trump coin. And when Trump got into office, right, he said he's going to be the crypto president and he's going to do more things for crypto and Bitcoin than anyone has before. Yet, here we are a year later. We've heard a lot of promises of regulation and more favorable conditions, but the price of Bitcoin is now significantly lower than when Trump took office last year. So from your seat at the table, what is your generation seeing from Trump right now? Is his presidency right now being seen as a net positive for Bitcoin? Because long term you think it'll still do what he's intending and saying it'll do? Or is it maybe a net negative? Because right now we're down like 20 or 30 grand from where it was when his presidency started, I think. It was like 90,000 something.
Yeah.
So how is Gen Z interpreting Trump in terms of whether he's making Bitcoin or is doing more or less for Bitcoin's future? I'd be curious as to what your take is on that.
Yeah, I think personally, I would say it's a net positive just because I'm still bullish on the United States and the strategic Bitcoin reserve. I think, when I saw Trump get inaugurated and then he released that Trump coin, I was like furious. I was like, this is a disaster. But I think, that in and of itself was a net negative. That made him look so unserious about Bitcoin and what he said. I feel like he was like all like 100% Bitcoin, no altcoins. And then he came out with this coin and it was just very confusing and seemed like he was telling two stories. But I think, I don't know, you have a point. We're down a lot and
it's hard.
A lot of my generation too is, now what I'm seeing too on TikTok is now Gen Zers are associating Bitcoin with one, Epstein, but two, like a Republican movement. And so that could be a huge net negative because Bitcoin doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care who you associate with, doesn't care who you vote for. It's freedom tech and it's freedom money. And that's the message I'm trying to amplify. But unfortunately, my generation loves to just take one single point and run with it. And so it'll be our duty as educators to really clear that up and just amplify that message of neutrality.
Yeah, it's a shame to me that this starts to get used as a bit of a partisan football. And just because like you said, I mean, Bitcoin doesn't care about your politics. Bitcoin is a mirror, whether if you're a Republican or conservative or a progressive, you will find something in Bitcoin that fits with your values, that is either conservative or progressive. Bitcoin is in fact both of those things at once. It has this dualism to it. And so I think it's kind of a shame. I mean, do you think that what's your message to folks who may be looking at Bitcoin but saying, well, I'm not going to get involved in that because that's just something related to Trump. That's a Republican thing. So therefore it must be bad. I mean, do you have anything that, like, when you talk to your friends about this, even how do you try to structure that conversation to make them understand that, look, no, and anyone who tries to associate it like that is trying to trick you basically?
Yeah. I mean, my first thought on that is money associated with a specific political group? No, it's a way that money is a representation of your time and energy and the value that you provide to the world in exchange for goods. And so if you think that cash is associated with either the Democrats or Republicans, then I think you just need to go back to the books and understand money first. But I think this whole story is just like a cautionary one about trusting political figures and trusting that they're gonna maybe push adoption forward. I would say as Americans, maybe we were too bullish on Trump and what he stands for when it comes to Bitcoin. I think, this is just a warning, like, don't trust the political figures. At the end of the day, stack as much as you can and hodl. I mean, I do spend and contribute to the network as well, but I mean, can't trust one political figure to bring mass adoption. Think it just comes down to the individual. And I try to inspire curiosity because I feel like if you just try to shove this message down young people's throats, it's not going to work. But I try to ask them questions like, what do you think money is then? What do you think, and especially when it comes to this Epstein FUD too, I'm seeing all these people say like, oh, well, it's pedal coin. Like all the criminals are using it to get away with crimes. And it's like, okay, well, they also use the internet and Gmail and they drove cars. These are all tools that we have at our fingertips that can either be used for good or bad. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, let's not forget that Epstein was banked by J.P. Morgan Chase, right?
There you go.
They've literally paid hundreds of millions in fines as a cost of doing business for laundering money for a convicted pedophile and sex trafficker. So it's like, strange that nobody went to jail there and nobody's calling J.P. Morgan Chase pedo bank, but maybe we should start. I'm just
maybe
I'm
we
just saying
should.
I'm not calling it that. I wouldn't ever say something like that, but maybe other people might.
Walker.
Yeah, I like it. But I want to move on because, Halston, it seems like what we need is more viral Bitcoin content on TikTok. And our next story is about TikTok specifically because it's currently facing one of its most serious regulatory challenges yet after European Union watchdogs formally charged the platform with breaching online safety rules over features designed to keep users endlessly scrolling. Regulators say the app's core design creates a compulsive behavior, and children and other vulnerable users are especially subject to this. The European Commission says TikTok may now be forced to redesign key parts of its service to end this infinite scrolling loop, or it's going to face fines of up to 6% of owner ByteDance's global revenue. So these charges follow a year-long investigation under the EU's Digital Services Act, which gives regulators broad powers to police harmful content and platform behavior. Officials say TikTok failed to properly assess how its features affect users' mental and physical health, ignored warning signs such as late-night use by minors and unusually frequent app openings. The commission argues the TikTok system consistently generates new content to keep users in autopilot mode, reinforcing habits that are difficult to break. EU regulators say TikTok has not put in place effective screen time limits or parental controls despite years of criticism. The findings suggest Europe is no longer focused on illegal posts or misinformation, but is now targeting the psychological architecture of major platforms, the algorithms and interfaces that shape how people behave online. TikTok has strongly rejected the allegations, calling them false and politically motivated, and says it will fight the case. But this case signals a broader shift in tech regulation. Governments are moving beyond content moderation and toward regulating engagement itself. I'd like to bring Hank and Halston back up here. Halston, I'll kick this over to you first, because again, I am not, an avid TikTok user, but obviously this is an incredibly popular platform, especially amongst younger generations. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, I mean, do you think that it's ultimately the government's job to regulate these sorts of things to protect the children, or does this ultimately come down to parental responsibility for how you teach your kids to responsibly engage with technology?
Absolutely. I don't think it's the government's responsibility to regulate. I do think it comes down to the parent. Listen, I'll say I am not pro-regulation whatsoever, but I do think that there's a difference between a government telling you what you can do with your money, and which I'm against, and holding a corporation accountable for deliberately engineering addiction in children. I do think that these allegations are not flawed. I think they're very real. However, I do think that the EU is politically motivated to move forward with this. I'm totally against the EU doing that. I think, though, there's a lot of truth in these allegations. Like, TikTok is a dopamine slot machine. It is highly addictive, and it was designed by some of the world's most powerful, sophisticated, and smart engineers on the planet to target young brains that aren't fully developed yet, to make it highly addictive. And I don't think that's freedom. I think that's exploitation. And I think that TikTok has certainly been a net negative, especially on Gen Z and the generation below mine, Gen Alpha. I think that there's definitely people that need to be held accountable. I don't think it's the government's job to do that.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I agree with you a lot on this, Halston. For me, it's get the damn phone out of these kids' hands. Kids should not be having phones, so they're probably 16 anyway. I didn't have a phone until I was 16, different time. But, that's the first thing. And second thing, if there's anything the government might want to take some responsibility for, is I think, I've heard many times that the algorithm works differently here in the United States than it does in China. It's my understanding that in China, they're force feeding their population more like educational content, things that would be less likely to rot your brain. Well, here in the United States, Ours apparently filters us all of this garbage that we can't stop watching. It's really the junk food of information, right? And underdeveloped brains or not, I have been guilty very many times of falling victim to this algorithm. But with this new transition that we're seeing in this part of TikTok being sold to American interests, I think we need to look into maybe the United States government can figure out how we can start giving people real content that does them some use in life, educational or something else, rather than feeding me dumb dog and cat videos all the freaking time. That's what I think we need to be responsible for, because we have this powerful algorithm, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a thing that's used for bad. How can we take this powerful thing and use it for good? That I would like to see the United States government step in on, because if all of a sudden we've got 200 million kids or whatever it is in the United States using TikTok to learn and become more knowledgeable and smarter and equipped for the world, then that sounds like it's a good thing. But in terms of, making these, trying to hold these individual companies responsible, that's crazy to me. It's crazy.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that though. If they did that, then we would be there would be too many critical thinkers, right? And then they can't have that.
God forbid. God forbid. Everybody be using Bitcoin now. Bitcoin would be at $5 million. Right. Everybody would understand it.
It's all deliberate design.
Yeah. What do you think, Walker? Yeah, Walker, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I always, and Hank, you know this because we've gone back and forth on this quite a bit, but I am never a fan of government stepping in to regulate and create a larger regulatory moat for these large companies as a first line of defense against, quote, protecting the children. There's that old meme, how would you like, it's Uncle Sam, how would you like this wrapped? Counterterrorism or protect the children? It's the same sort of thing every time. It's the exact same logic that is used with all these online safety acts. And all of those online safety acts that you saw in Australia that's going to be implemented in the UK, I think France has another one, what we just talked about, was it Portugal too that's coming out with another one? They're all ultimately designed to create links between people's online identities and their physical identities, because they're going to require IDs to use all these platforms. Now, again, this is all done under the guise of protecting the children, but the end result of this ends up being that you've got everybody's physical identity tied to their digital identity. You can't, very difficult to be anonymous online, and you have to get ID'd to use a platform. And then furthermore, one of my biggest beefs with this sort of thing is that it just further increases the regulatory moat that the very, very large platforms already have. That, Meta or, TikTok and ByteDance, name any of these really big social media platforms, they have massive teams of lawyers and massive budgets for dealing with all these regulatory compliance issues. This basically guarantees that they will always be the top dogs, that there won't be free market competition that's going to come up with smaller companies trying to kind of take a stab at these, because they simply can't afford the compliance. And the big companies like this. It's why they're the ones who push. It's why OpenAI pushes for more AI regulation. It's because they don't want up-and-comers to be able to have the resources to actively fight against them in the free market. They want basically to regulate small companies to death, while they just keep raking in the profits to pay their massive compliance teams. But I realize I'm not always in the majority on that. Halston, I don't know if you had a take on that. Am I off base here?
Yeah, I don't think you're off base at all. I completely agree with that. I'm all for free markets, and I think I'd much rather see parents and communities step up. I think they got to be the ones to name it and decide what's good for their kids. Personally, I got a phone at probably too young of an age. I think I was 12. iPhone 5C was my first phone. And I think that really, I think the story resonates with me because it really, I don't know, it just was not a good thing. And at first it was mostly just for communication and trying to be able to text my parents about sports or school or whatever. But I think it was such a net negative. And so I think I'm passionate about helping people not develop a TikTok addiction and a phone addiction, but at the end of the day, it should have been the parents' duties and responsibility to prevent that.
Hank, what was your first phone?
Mine? It was 16. It was a flip phone. It was very exciting. So my parents could keep track of me, but we didn't, I think text messaging was barely a thing. I'm really dating myself here. But yeah, here's the thing too, right? This really, we should be asserting accountability, and Halston mentioned this, back onto the parents, because how many parents do you see now that just take a freaking iPad and they give it to their kid, or an iPhone and they just let them go, rather than, I don't know, spending actual time with their child. So, the accountability here falls on the parents, and that's something I think we've gotten a little lazy on in the last couple of decades. But
I
We'll see how
agree.
it plays out. I don't know. I mean, we've already seen it other places, so. All right, I think we got one more story, so I think we're going to move on to that one, gang, and it's on me. So here we go. As authorities in Rome have begun charging tourists €2 to step down to the basin of the Trevi Fountain and toss a coin, marking one of the most visible efforts yet by a major European city to control overcrowding at a landmark that now attracts millions a year. The fee applies during peak hours for visitors who want close access to the lower viewing area, while those who prefer to stay in the surrounding piazza can still view the fountain for free. Now, city officials say the goal is not to discourage tourism, but to reduce congestion and help fund maintenance and security, with expected annual revenue reaching several million euro. Now, more than 10 million people visited the Trevi Fountain last year, with daily crowds sometimes reaching into the tens of thousands, turning a narrow historic space into something closer to a slow-moving human traffic jam. For decades, anyone could walk up, linger, take photos, and toss a coin without restriction. But that free model quietly created rising costs in wear and tear, cleanup, policing, and crowd management. And while Rome collects roughly €1 million a year from the coins thrown into that fountain, the money does not come close to covering the broader economic burden of mass tourism. And according to the DW News, many tourists say they actually welcome the small fee. Take a look.
A lot of the tourists, I think they simply felt by making this payment, at least that would help towards maintaining this Baroque masterpiece. It was completed in 1762 and is still fed by an ancient Roman aqueduct. Wow. So there was a feeling at least that this would go towards saving it. Others, though, felt it was a bit unfair. Some Italians from other parts of Italy said it was not fair that they had to pay a ticket because, of course, it's only local residents, people with disabilities and children under 6 who don't have to pay for a ticket.
All right, Halston, Rome is charging people to get close and throw more money into this Trevi Fountain. Does that sound reasonable to you, or is that like putting a price tag on culture? I want the Gen Zers perspective.
Yeah, this is such an interesting story. I guess for me, I'm kind of accustomed to this. You know, I've done a lot of traveling within the States, and anytime you go to a museum, you pay a small fee. I don't think there's anything too abnormal here. I think what's ironic, though, is like people come to this fountain, at least from my understanding, to make a wish. So it's like people are so desperate. We're seeing over tourism at this fountain. And what does the government do? They turn around and they monetize the desperation. I think that's kind of ironic and funny. But yeah, I mean, if that's what it takes to preserve the fountain, then I don't think €2 is costing an arm and a leg. I'm okay with, I'm all for preserving the history, especially here in the United States. And so I totally don't mind paying whenever I go to a museum or landmark. I think as humans, we need to get better about just taking care of our space and not trashing and destroying the things that should be preserved.
Yeah, not that surprising though. I remember I was in the Eiffel Tower like decades ago, and I was at the very top, and I had to use the bathroom, and they required money to use the bathroom there, and I was like, I can't get behind this whole Europe thing. Walker, what do you make of this situation?
Well, I mean, I think that Europe is functionally an open air museum, so I think that it makes sense for them to ultimately charge entry prices to get at some of it. I've only been in the Trevi Fountain once. It was some years ago, and it was under construction at the time, so there was no water flowing. I was unable to make a wish. I was left high and quite literally dry. But I mean, I think that this makes sense. I think that Europe has such, like, the biggest thing Europe has going for it is its cultural history. That's what makes Europe so strong, that European culture. You know, so much of Western civilization that we know today is thanks to the great minds, the great painters, the great artists, the great sculptors of Europe. And so maintaining these incredible landmarks, these pieces of beauty, because we don't build things like that anymore. There's not a new Trevi Fountain. You know, it's the Trevi Fountain. That's it. There's nothing that we build that's new that has that same level of just, I think, attention to detail. You know that it was handcrafted by these master masons, by these incredible craftsmen and artisans, and they put so much time. It's the same thing with the cathedrals of Europe. You have these, hundreds or thousands of year old structures, and I think we should do everything we can to maintain those. And there's no such thing as a free lunch. Nobody has the absolute right to just come into a country and expect to just get everything for free. Apparently, people think that in America, but it's actually very much not the case. I don't think it should be the case in Europe either, especially when it comes to beautiful cultural landmarks. I think, if you want to maintain these things, you have to ultimately pay for them. Like, right? This is, again, no such thing as a free lunch. And yeah, I'm happy to go there and pay 2 infinitely printable euros for it. Maybe they should accept Bitcoin though. Maybe that would be a better move.
Maybe. Open air museum is a really great way to put it, Walker. I got to give you credit on that one. And Halston, I got one more question for you before we wrap things up for today. You know, we have social media now very clearly sending millions of people to the same Insta-worthy or Instagram-worthy spots, right? Do you think this kind of system is basically the future for tourism everywhere? Are we going to start seeing, you know, a couple euro donations just to sit, you know, stand at the base of the Sears or the Eiffel Tower? Is this just the beginning? Could you see this expanding throughout Europe and beyond?
For sure. For sure. I think that my generation is all about the gram, all about the pictures or it didn't happen mentality. It's sad. I try to live in the moment, but I could definitely see Europe and many other countries adopting this monetization of landmarks and historical architecture for sure. All for the Instagram.
Yeah, if it keeps alive the relics of yesteryear, I'm all for it. So I'm okay with it. Walker, your final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that I would rather have people paying for things than to see citizens taxed by their government to then maintain them, right?
Yeah.
It's ultimately, if this ends up being a way to get more revenue to maintain beautiful pieces of culture that have stood the test of time and to make sure that they're not just allowed to crumble into dust, I think that that's a good thing. And again, you know, I don't expect anything to be free in this world. Nothing really is. And if it is free, somebody's probably trying to sell you something on the other side. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, it would have helped a lot of all those Banksies that have been torn down over the time because people rip them out. If you're at least charging people to go there, there's probably security. The likelihood of it staying in better condition for longer is obviously a lot higher. So I'm all for it. I think it's a small price to pay to keep the relics of yesteryear. So I'm glad we can all agree on that one because that wraps us up for this Friday edition here at Roxom TV News Gang. Halston, so great to have you back on the show. I want to thank you for joining us. And I'm sure just like last time, you made a couple of new fans out there. For those new fans, what's the best place I can send them to see what you're up to, any hot takes you may have on the industry, or anything else? Where can I tell them to go?
Yeah, I'm primarily on X, just at Halston Valencia. I just started an Instagram page as well, same thing at Halston Valencia if you want to follow. Trying to tap into that Gen Z brain rot and trying to mitigate that with some good, solid, sound Bitcoin education. So you can follow me there. And yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure is ours, Halston. Thanks so much for joining us. And Walker, before I let you go, fun things this weekend, places I can send people, let us know.
Oh, you know, just you can just find me at Walker America, wherever you get your slop, or head on over to Noster if you don't want quite as much slop. If you think the vibes are bad on X, you'd be surprised at how good they are over on Noster. Just go to primal.net/Walker and we can talk over there. I promise you will have a better time than on X.
Well, I've had a great time with both of you today, gang. So Halston, Walker, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to have each of you together or separately. And I hope you both have an amazing weekend, you two. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Likewise. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. All right, gang, that's a wrap for our Friday edition here at Roxom TV News. If you haven't already, do the thing. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Roxom TV, Roxom TV News, Hank at Roxom TV, and Walker America, wherever you can find us on your doom-scrolling platform of choice. That is a wrap for this week of top news stories, but we will be back on Monday for more of the same. But remember, our Monday time is at 10 a.m. Pacific to 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. Pacific, and then we are 8 to 10 a.m. through the rest of the week. So 10 a.m. on Monday, and we will see you then. In the meantime, have a happy, healthy, and safe weekend, everybody, and I will see you boys and girls mañana.